This has been Shadow Soldiers, Shadow Soldiers Series Book 1, written by Rath W. Asing, narrated by Stephen Floyd, copyright 2017 by William C. Joyce III, production copyright by William C. Joyce III. About the author. Rath W. Asing is a pseudonym, an anagram created to remove celebrity from the author and place the focus on the central message of these adventures and other books contemplated. The E is silent. So is the warrior. But the vigilance, while silent, is real. The author can be identified as a part of these novellas, a character, either unique or composite, that moves through these military thrillers. As the publishing editor and an advocate of these adventures, I requested more background, but the dark stare ended my inquiry. Anonymity is an asset to those who walk the dark side of our world. It is a double-edged sword, taking away the rights of the individual for full disclosure, but providing shelter for the bearer of the burden of our protection. In my last conversation with the author, he indicated his prayer was that someday dark soldiers would not be necessary. On this and the underlying message of these stories, I place my credence of the author's good character. William Joyce, Project Advocate. Mercy Strained. Synopsis. This is the mission of one dark soldier who entered the military to build the skills necessary to exact her revenge on the monsters who stole her childhood and her womanhood. The price of allowing child abuse to continue is real, and it is time to stand up against this onslaught of evil. Chapter 1. Judge and Jury. The Hide. I checked my surroundings carefully. It is second nature and gives me a calm sense of control. With the full 360-degree surveillance completed, I tensed my calf muscles, beginning another round of exercises. I had been in hiding for 18 hours, and as usual on this type of mission, hourly isometric exercises were vital for staying prepared. In a few minutes, the target would emerge from his garage, carrying his newspaper and whistling some made-up tune. The target. He stood 5 feet 10 inches tall and had a paunch belly from too much beer. His hair grew gray and long, a sign his life had been lived too long in my estimation. He had been sent to juvenile detention in his youth for statutory rape, and he had been apprehended twice in his adult life but never again convicted. I looked down at the 4 pictures my research had uncovered. 4 sweet young girls destroyed by a monster whistling tunes only known within the confines of his demented skull. He had a family with 2 daughters, but that didn't weigh into my decision except to keep them from harm. One was just beginning to blossom, and knowing this type of reprobate, she would become fair game. The black stone he had received 6 days ago sat on the desk in his study. It had the Roman numeral 6 on its cut and polished surface. He had forgotten about the funny gift taped to his steering wheel when he had come out of the bar. Chances were no one would consider it important as long as Detective Christian from Texas did not receive the incident report. Execution. The light rain moistened in the driveway, making it a little slippery. The garage door's electric motor engaged and it slid up on its tracks. He whistled but seemed perturbed by the drizzle. Holding his newspaper over his head, he walked out to the car and fumbled one-handed with the lock. I was 1,500 feet away and the wind would have no effect. Sighting, I took the first shot. His scream startled the neighborhood as he reached for a crotch that no longer existed. I had used a hollow point round tearing through his flesh. The second solid brass projectile was much more merciful. It entered his temple and ended the tormented sound of his screams forever. His body slumped over in a crumpled mess of blood, gore, and brain matter. Calmly picking up my brass and weapon, I began my exit. I broke the gun down and placed it in a foam-filled suitcase that fit right behind the truck toolbox, its hidden panel well defended by my mastery of metalwork. I slowly folded the tarp, making sure none of my evidence slipped off, and stored it at the bottom of the toolbox. One final check of the hideout, and I considered it cleared. It was time to move on to the next phase of the escape. I took off the military coveralls I had purposefully dyed to match the surroundings of the hide. The boots and the form-fitting gloves were also removed and bagged. These would be deposited in a furnace across town, but for now they were stuffed in with the gun case. On the passenger seat of the truck was a stylish pink summer dress. I loved the way it made me look, and after using face cream and paper towels to remove the camouflage from my face, I donned the dress. Letting my hair down and shaking it into place, I took out a compact and painted on my next mask, that of a young lady driving to work on a drizzly day. Traffic clogged the neighborhood as the egresses were guarded by the flashing lights of police vehicles. I drove by the entrance, observing the arm waves of the cop directing traffic. I had no reason to look into the neighborhood and ask questions. Smiling at the officer as he waved me through, I cleared the impediment, headed south for a few miles, and then changed direction toward the furnace to finish my cleanup. The posse. I will admit the stone was an issue, but something deep inside of me wanted these monsters to know doom was upon them. The problem with being a sniper was that it was not up close and personal. Of the 42 kills so far, 34 had shown major signs of worry, and most had been found with the stone in their pocket at their time of death. So far, the stone had stumped rather than helped law enforcement. 2 major city detectives came up with the theory that the stone was an access token to one of the many deviant underground networks. Show your stone and get inside the deviant den. This caused a nationwide hunt for a criminal network, leaving me to my solitary stalk. The stones were the only physical evidence my detective from Texas had. But this had not stopped his inquiry. He knew something was out of place, and these killings were not random. He had the uncanny ability to put small snippets of information together and come up with a solid theory. He was a good detective, and as far as I could observe, a good man. Unlike the wonderful detective movies I loved to watch on a rainy day, this criminal was not caught up in her fatal flaw. Everything I did was planned and properly executed. I had a great deal of work to accomplish, and getting caught was not part of the plan. Since my picture had first appeared on a milk carton, I had been in training for my life's work, to rid the world of 100 rapists. Enough. Synopsis. Enough is a military thriller delving into the dark areas of the soldier's conscience. Set in the Texas and North Mexico deserts, the action explodes as the characters deal with their understanding of revenge. Enough is the story of a lifer sergeant whose family is brutally killed by a Mexican drug cartel in the U.S. national forests. The pain of loss moves the soldier to go beyond all he has fought for and seek revenge. He gathers others to his cause, and they too must deal with going beyond their calling. We live in a world locked in constant struggle. Rules of war are built to keep chaos from erupting. What happens when the evil spreading in the world causes a soldier trained to protect to reach the breaking point? Enough is the story of a warrior's pain and the challenges of conscience when horrific things happen. Chapter 1. Tears. The slow procession from the hearses to the small painted church under the pecan trees held all in silence. The shuffle of feet on the worn tile floors and the creaking of pews beat out the rhythm of the last march of the Benning family. He stood in at the back, not venturing into the church of his boyhood, out of respect, not fear. He looked at the last of the family he had known, lined up in dark pine boxes down the center aisle of the church filled with mourners. One by one, the 5 caskets were carried by pallbearers out the side of St. Mary's Catholic Church to the waiting graves. Alice and Charles had taken their 3 children on the adventure of a lifetime, an 8-week spring vacation to the national parks in Wyoming. On the trails of Yellowstone, they were beaten, raped, defiled, and left as carrion for the wild beasts. Mary, Jeff, and Courtney Benning's mangled bodies held the vestiges of fear and torment they had suffered. The boy had been found still half tied to a tree amidst the stones used to bludgeon him to death. The 2 girls and the mother had suffered a fate much worse. The father's shocked expression had frozen to his face the moment the bullet struck his temple. The mother's look of anguish was beyond all the soldier could stomach, and he retched when he saw the strawberry hair of the little one matted with blood and dirt. The identification required by law festered in his mind. The cool respite of the ancient church with its scenes of miracles and love could not remove the darkness growing within his mind. A witness hiding among bushes on a hill above the trail had described Juan Macias, a known drug trafficker on the Homeland Security watch list. No arrests had been made, and while the world continued to spin, a soldier stood ramrod straight at the foot of the grave of the littlest Benning. The drizzle and the darkening sky blunted the scene from the highway as the last of the cars pulled out into the night. He remembered the strawberry-haired tot always getting into all kinds of trouble, just too cute to reprimand. He remembered her giggle and her plea for one more story. He remembered the one place he had felt at home since the day he had left for the service. Standing above the graves through the night, he remembered, and he wept. Sarge, the only name he had used for more than 30 years, stood watch that night and the next day. Finally, as the sun set again, he slowly saluted the place where Courtney lay and turned toward the west. He would not let the hill country of Texas hold the graves of loved ones. There they would rest, but he would not. A hatred he had never felt before welled up in his very soul. Not a tool used by soldiers in battle, not a force of nature to be explained away by shrinks, but a powerful instinct to abandon his humanity and seek out revenge. He had had enough. A Child's Cry. Synopsis. Called by a friend from his military past, Sergeant James Terrence J.T. Welder forms a team of mercenaries to rescue a little girl and destroy the gang who took her from her family. Aligned with law enforcement from Belgium, Interpol, and NATO, JT sets up a mission to remove the Mentiev gang from existence. His challenge will be when the law and the darker side of the mercenary world collide. JT will attempt to recover the child and deliver a message to the world that child slavery will no longer be tolerated. How long will society allow our children to be ruined by greedy people? Will a warrior stand and draw the line to end this vile crime? Is this beyond the call of the soldier? Travel with JT and experience the reality of child slavery in the world today. Chapter 1. Departure. Allowing my mind to take in every detail of the room, I made sure all was in order. Habit had become a friend, and it was comforting to see everything in my normal person habitat was prepared for my departure. I wore a set of well-worn old man jeans and a flannel shirt of dull browns. The final garment, a tattered gray jacket, finished the picture that masked my true identity from the outside world. They saw an old man on a trip to somewhere. Checking the lock by pulling on the door and waving to the children in the common pool just outside my apartment door were habits the neighbors had come to expect. I ambled, leaning on my walking staff, to the parking lot. My trusty pickup truck looked just a little bit older and maybe even a little more beat up than me. The door creaked as usual when I opened it and got in. One thing I knew about normal was allowing those around me to expect my departure as ordinary. I could be gone 3 days or 4 months, and they had to consider it just another outing for old Poppy. The maintenance guy would find the note in the clip by the door and know I went to see my ailing sister up in Oklahoma. He'd check the apartment every few days or so and add to the level of normal within my small community. When leaving on a trip, I carried a satchel across my shoulder so I could walk with my staff unobstructed. If anyone looked into the worn leather open-topped bag, they would see a few flannel shirts and maybe some underwear poking up from the bottom. It always held the same contents. It was a prop, as were so many of the embellishments seen by any who cared to watch an old man getting into his truck and departing. The drive held to a pattern for the first few miles. West, away from the apartment, and then in a northerly direction toward the interstate highway system that would eventually funnel its traffic out of Texas and into Oklahoma. I also began the process of transformation, no longer a tottering old man, but an observant driver, making sure no one followed my progress, doubling back at odd intervals and stopping to pick up groceries to assure I had left my normal life behind. By the third stop, which included topping off the gas tank, I was sure I'd avoided detection. Getting onto Interstate 35 West, I concentrated on putting miles of pavement behind me, drinking the 2 cups of coffee and eating the pastry purchased on my surveillance stops. I also squirmed out of the tattered coat and pulled out a leather jacket from behind the bench seat of the pickup. A ranger's ball cap covered my close-cropped gray hair. Not a prop, but a hereditary fact, and the transformation from old man to lethal warrior began. The pants and shirt had prosthetics, adding 30 pounds to my lean frame, but they would have to wait until the next stop to be replaced. For now, the jacket removed the shoulder abnormality, and I sat up straight in the seat, staring forward and concentrating on my next assignment.